Chapter 326. Pei-Chi-Chi accidentally bumped into the area where he was wrapped in the towel. What was even more unfortunate was that the towel had loosened. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Pei-Chi-Chi raised her little face and looked at him with a pitiful expression. Tang Yu's eyes were deep and bottomless as he looked down at her. He pinched her chin and moved to the side so that she wouldn't see him in such a sorry state. "You can't wait to throw yourself into my arms." He took the hairdryer from her hand, calmly bent down to pick up the towel, wrapped it around his body, and casually dried his hair. Pei-Chi-Chi stood there and didn't even know that her feet were numb. Just now when she saw him, she was excited. She shook her head and didn't dare to think about it anymore. She was afraid that if she continued to think about it, she wouldn't be able to control herself and would throw herself at him. Tang Yu quickly finished drying his hair, put down his things, and walked out. After he left, Pei-Chi-Chi couldn't fall asleep. Her hand didn't hurt too much, but, with him around, she always felt uneasy. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she would suddenly wake up when she felt sleepy. She would always feel that someone had suddenly entered the room. After staying up like this for half the night, she finally couldn't sleep anymore. She quietly got up and wanted to go to the balcony outside to see how the snow was falling. She had just opened the door to the room when she was choked by the smoke outside. She instinctively wanted to retreat to her bedroom, to return to that safe little world, but her waist was quickly grabbed by someone, and then she was pressed against the door, firmly pressed. He had a burning masculine scent on his body, and it affected her domineeringly. "Tang Yu." Her voice was extremely weak, and her body struggled slightly. However, her weak strength was no different from a kitten in front of him. Instead, he suppressed her even more forcefully. She could only look at him helplessly. Her watery eyes seemed to be soaked in a layer of water in the dark. "Don't call me Mr. Tang anymore." He bent down to look at her, and before she could react, he kissed her little mouth. She awkwardly turned away, but he held her little head with one hand and held her in place. Mixed with the scent of tobacco and masculinity, he invaded her domineeringly. As the kiss deepened, his large palm moved downwards without hesitation. "Don't." Pei-Chi-Chi let out a broken voice. She pushed him with her injured hand. Even though it was very painful, she still pushed him. She could not have sex with him again. Tang Yu stopped abruptly, his deep eyes staring at her. "You don't want it." His large palms were teasing her cruelly, and his dark eyes were cold as he watched her struggle, pain, and despair from the torture. Pei-Chi-Chi's forehead was dripping with sweat. Her head drooped to one side, desperately trying not to make a weak sound. "Even so, you don't want it." He approached her, a small flame burning in his eyes, enough to ignite her. "No, no, no." She shook her head desperately, almost crying. She had known about love affairs for a long time. This kind of thing, or it could be said that once Yu Wang's gate was opened, it would be difficult to close it again. It was fine if he was alone, but now that he was teasing her like this, she couldn't take it at all. She almost went limp on his palm, and she was in a sorry state. Tang Yu leaned close to her ear, and his voice was low and hoarse. "Is that so? Then what is this?" Pei-Chi-Chi closed her eyes immediately, refusing to look. "You don't dare to look. You don't dare to admit that you want me." He bit her little ear, grabbed her hand, and tortured her even more. Chapter 327. Pei-Chi-Chi finally burst into tears. With one hand hanging around his neck, she moved her lips to his with misty eyes, as though she was begging to kiss him. Tang Yu's dark eyes looked at her quietly, and all his movements stopped. Then, he let go of her and smiled faintly. "Miss Pei, I think you've misunderstood." Her eyes narrowed, but he was still smiling. He said nonchalantly, "I have a girlfriend." He took 2 steps back and admired the way she looked at that moment. Pei Chi clutched her pajamas tightly to cover her body. She glared at him. "You jerk. Whatever you say." His expression turned a little cold. "Pei Chi, I've said it before. I won't wait for you in the same place forever." He even said to her a little cruelly, "Fei is more obedient and sensible than you are." As he said that, his dark eyes stared into her eyes, not letting go of any slight change in her. Pei Chi's body was warm, but her heart was cold. She leaned against the door tightly and stared at him. Slowly, her lips curled into a small smile. "Then I'll have to congratulate you." After saying that, she felt indescribably tired. She loosened her fingers, opened the door, and walked into her bedroom. The door closed. She leaned against the door and closed her eyes. She couldn't help but cry. Tang Yu was too despicable. She sobbed softly. Then, she squatted down and hugged herself with one hand. She had said that she wouldn't cry anymore, but she couldn't help but cry when he treated her like this. Pei Chi thought that perhaps she should leave this city. She couldn't stand seeing Tang Yu and Sun Feifei after they got married. She would go crazy. She had previously planned to move the Pei Corporation's headquarters away and sell that piece of land. It wasn't a bad thing for the Pei Corporation, and it would give them more liquidity. Although this wasn't what she wanted. Now, she admitted that she was a coward and that she was running away. He was too powerful. She couldn't defend against him. Outside the door, Tang Yu was only wearing a white shirt and trousers. Just now, it was a lie to say that he didn't want her. He wanted her so much that he was crazy, but he wasn't a man who couldn't control his lower body. He wanted her, but before she was honest with him, he would never touch her. He had his pride. Tang Yu pursed his lips tightly and returned to the small guest room. The place was very small, so he made do with lying down for the night. He left early the next morning and used her phone to call Meng Qingqing. Downstairs, Meng Qingqing watched as Tang Yu walked down the stairs. He looked around again and thought of Tang Yu's absence last night. He smiled and said, "Don't tell me that Sun Feifei lives here." As he spoke, he handed a cell phone to Tang Yu. "You left it in the car. By the way, I have bad news for you. Your car probably needs a thorough cleaning. I heard from the driver that Miss Sun did a lot of indecent things in the car. You don't want to know. Scrap the car." Tang Yu opened the car door and got in. It wasn't because Sun Feifei did anything to the car, but because he had sat with Sun Feifei and Pei Chi had seen it. Meng Qingqing smiled. "That's such a waste." He glanced upstairs again. Actually, he didn't need to think to know who lived here. There was no one else but Pei Chi. Chapter 328. Meng Qingqing smiled and said, "You've fallen into her trap." Tang Yu didn't say anything. He just smiled and said, "Let's go back to the rose garden and change." The car turned and went to the rose garden. At 10 in the morning, Meng Qingqing walked into Tang Yu's office with a printed list of phone numbers in his hand. He put it in front of Tang Yu and sat down opposite him. "I've asked around." The day before the engagement, Pei Chi was alone and asked the bodyguards not to follow him. He must have gone to meet someone. There's a number on the phone, and it matches the time. It should be the person who met Pei Chi. Tang Yu held the piece of paper and looked at it. Meng Qingqing pointed at the number. "It's here." "Look," Tang Yu picked up his phone and dialed the number, but there was a voice message. "Sorry, the number you dialed is not in service. Please check before dialing." Meng Qingqing also heard it and said calmly, "It seems like this person consciously used a smurf to contact Pei Xiaoqi." Tang Yu knew that too. He thought for a while and said, Are there any other clues? I don't think so. I think we should follow it. Maybe we can find something else. Meng Qingqing shook his head and suggested. Tang Yu's slender fingers fiddled with his phone. After a while, he said calmly, get someone to monitor her phone. Also, get someone to watch her. Report to me if anything unusual happens. Meng Qingqing shrugged and smiled. Are you sure? What about Sun Feifei? Who will be the big one? But I don't think Pei Qiqi will be willing. Tang Yu glared at him fiercely. Okay, pretend I didn't say anything. Meng Qingqing raised his hand and suddenly sighed. Pei Xiaoqi has been burning incense for several lifetimes. Tang Yu's voice was deep. Don't alarm her. Meng Qingqing chuckled softly. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to hold it in. Last night, you slept at her place. How could you hold it in? He hadn't had sex for a few months. A little lamb was right in front of his mouth. How could he not eat it? Tang Yu ignored him and flipped open the document. All right, you can leave now. After Meng Qingqing left, he put down the pen in his hand and let out a long sigh. Indeed, he probably had internal injuries. However, before Tang Yu could find anything, he received news that the Pei Group was preparing to move. As for that piece of land, it was bought by Pei Mingyi many years ago. Now, it had risen to a few billion yuan, and it was the most valuable thing in the Pei Group. Tang Yu knew very well who she was leaving to avoid. Little liar, you said you didn't want to that night. It was clearly not the end of the world. However, he still approved of her doing this. Pei Qiqi actually had some business acumen. Xiao Ran stood in front of Tang Yu, not daring to make a sound. In the past few months, the CEO had been in a bad mood, and the employees of Xingyuan hadn't been having a good time either. It was supposed to be the off-season at the end of the year, but they had managed to achieve results in the peak season. However, this didn't make the CEO smile. His expression became colder and colder. Although he was still handsome, she still missed the approachable CEO. Where is the Pei Group going to move? Tang Yu squeezed the invitation, his voice tense. Xiao Ran answered quickly, in the VIP lounge of the Pearl Hotel. Chapter 329. Xiao Ran thought in his heart, it's so lively. Tang Yu looked at the time. It was the 5th day of the first lunar month. She couldn't wait. Tell the organizer that I'll be there, Tang Yu said lightly. Xiao Ran wasn't surprised, but he felt pity for Sun Feifei. She had already taken half a step into the Tang family and might have to take it back. After Xiao Ran left, Tang Yu sat quietly. The phone on the table rang. He picked it up. It was the second secretary's voice. President, Miss Sun is looking for you. Should I put her through? Tang Yu was stunned for a moment before he remembered that it was Sun Feifei. She would have a concert at Sound Nest on New Year's Eve. Xingyuan was the investor and had invested 100 million yuan. He still needed to cooperate with Sun Feifei while maintaining this superficial relationship with her. Of course, more importantly, he wanted her to cooperate with him. Put her through. Tang Yu said lightly, then pulled his tie and waited. After a while, Sun Feifei said, Tang Yu, I'm reminding you that my concert is the day after tomorrow. As my boyfriend, don't forget. He let out a faint sound, extremely cold and indifferent. Sun Feifei didn't know why she used to be so infatuated with him. He was clearly a man without a heart. Also, my parents asked if you would like to have a reunion dinner with us after the concert. She admitted that she was making things difficult for him. Tang Yu's voice was deep. I think from the day we work together, we have to at least make sure that the other party won't be the one holding us back. If you need me to solve such a simple problem for you, then I don't mind changing teammates. Sun Feifei knew that he was calling her a pig-like teammate. She was furious, but she couldn't show it. Because the conditions he had given her were very tempting. She wanted to be famous and needed a strong backer in the music industry. She wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to soar to the top. "Okay, I'll explain to them myself," she said in a low voice. Then, Tang Yu hung up. Sun Feifei really wanted to scold someone, but there was no one to scold. She was really sure that Tang Yu did not have any feelings for her. Otherwise, a man could not be so cold. Tang Yu hung up the phone and made another call to Meng Qingqing. "Cooperate with Sun Feifei's agent and report the concert to all the major media outlets." Meng Qingqing knew him best. Of course, he knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, "I will definitely let Pei Shaoqi see how much you love Sun Feifei." Wasn't it easy to make a woman jealous? Throwing money like crazy to another woman. Therefore, within a day, the road signs, billboards, and electronic screens in B City were filled with the news of the concert held by Sound Nest. Furthermore, the title of the main character was "The Future Wife of Xingyuan CEO." These overwhelming advertisements were all done by Yu Xingyuan, so it was hard for Pei Qiqi not to know about them. She drove the car, and Sun Feifei's figure flashed by all the way. Occasionally, some of the more explicit advertisements directly used photos of Tang Yu and Sun Feifei to combine. Pei Qiqi pursed her lips and drove to the Pearl Hotel. She had come to confirm the situation of the auction venue on the 5th day of the new year. To her surprise, when she proposed the relocation of the Pei Group, everyone was in favor of it. Because the land was also part of the Pei Group's equity. The land was dead, and now that it had been exchanged for money, everyone was in favor of it. Chapter 330. After confirming the venue, she came out. There were a few temporary workers handing out flyers at the entrance. Seeing Pei Qiqi coming over, they immediately came up to her enthusiastically. "Miss, this is our Miss Sun Feifei's concert at Sound Nest. You must go and listen. Miss Sun Feifei is the youngest pianist in the country, and this concert was created by Mr. Tang from Xingyuan for her. There may be some mysterious interaction. Of course, there will be a live broadcast on the big screen of Xingyuan building." Pei Qiqi didn't reach out to take it. She just put on her sunglasses indifferently and walked towards her car. However, no matter where she went today, there were people handing out flyers and forcing those flyers with Tang Yu and Sun Feifei's names into her hands. There were about 10 flyers stuffed in her car. Sitting down, Pei Qiqi took the piece of paper and looked at it. Then, he smiled bitterly. He used to dote on her like this, and now, he also doted on others like this. She thought back to that night. She thought about how he had stopped abruptly. He had said that he had a girlfriend. Yes, he had a girlfriend. She could tell that Sun Feifei was a good person. She was very suitable for him. Pei Qiqi started the car expressionlessly. "Tang Yu, I won't cry, I won't cry." This city made her feel suffocated. She couldn't breathe because he was everywhere. For the first time, Pei Qiqi felt that auctioning the land was a wise choice. It was New Year's Eve. With Xingyuan's actions, even though the Sound Nest had only been built for a few days, the seats for a few thousand people were all filled. All the major media outlets were scrambling to report, and the spotlights of B City were shining brightly. Sun Feifei stood beside Tang Yu amidst the dazzling lights. She felt that although Tang Yu wasn't a good person, his money was a good thing. She had played the piano for so long, but she had never been so glamorous. She smiled sweetly. After thinking for a while, she wrapped her arms around Tang Yu's. Tang Yu narrowed his eyes, but he didn't push her away. Instead, he smiled at the cameras. All of this was accurately transmitted to the live stream in front of Xingyuan Tower. On New Year's Eve, there there was no one in front of the building except for Pei Chi-Chi, who was wearing a thick coat. She sat in the square, hugging herself as she watched him stand with another woman. She stared at his face. Actually, Tang Yu, this way, we can stay up together and celebrate the new year together. She allowed herself one last indulgence, just one last time, to look at him like this. Pei Chi-Chi closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she only saw Sun Feifei sitting in front of the piano, quietly playing, and Tang Yu was nowhere to be seen. There would be a mysterious interaction later on. Pei Chi-Chi smiled as she picked up a can of beer and poured it into her mouth. She wasn't used to drinking, so she choked on the wine and started tearing up. That feeling was the same as smoking for the first time. However, ever since Tang Yu had spanked her little but that time, she had never spanked him again. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and finished the can of beer in a short while. She had brought 6 bottles with her. I haven't congratulated you yet. She smiled foolishly at the screen. The moonlight shone on her, making her look exceptionally lonely. She loved him so much that her heart ached. The more she loved him, the more she didn't dare to be with him. Tang Yu, I often think that if I loved you less, would I have the courage to be with you? To hell with the guilt, to hell with the things that happened in our previous lives. We are who we are. Why should we pay for other people's actions? She muttered and shook her head. No, I can't do it when the person who gave birth to me hurt your mother like that. Chapter 331. She remembered the night before their engagement, when he had told her that he would have had a sister. When he said those words, his expression was somewhat disappointed, but also somewhat angry. This anger came from Zhao Ku. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and looked up. She held the beer can against the strong wind. Tang Yu, Happy New Year. She drank a lot of beer and got drunk. She sat there and smiled foolishly. She watched Sun Feifei perform on the big screen with tears in her eyes. But where was Tang Yu? Why didn't he appear again? Pei Chi-Chi felt dizzy and smiled foolishly. It was Lunar New Year's Eve. She had never spent Lunar New Year's Eve with Tang Yu. Previously, she had thought that she would spend Lunar New Year's Eve with him for the rest of her life. When she was young, when she was middle-aged, and when she was old, they would always be together. She finished the beer that she brought and was drunk. She was surrounded by Tang Yu's shadow. She stood on the empty square and screamed like a lunatic. Tang Yu, but where was he? She stood there alone. It was as if she was the only one left in the whole world. Those whom she cared about, those who cared about her, had left her. Dad, Qin Xinjie, Jinrong, Tang Yu, she hugged her body and squatted down slowly. Her little face was calm as if she had fallen asleep. After a while, she suddenly stood up and started to dance on the square, just like that night when she danced with Tang Yu. Pei Chi-Chi jumped, spun, and spun tirelessly. She felt dizzy, but she felt much better. It was only in this half-awake, half-asleep state that he was still hers. She didn't know if she was the one who made the sound. It was hoarse and powerful, echoing continuously between the buildings. Tang Yu belonged to Pei Chi-Chi. One sound after another, she stood there and smiled foolishly. She muttered, Tang Yu is mine. Tang Yu stood a distance away and looked at her quietly. Pei Chi-Chi, you coward. Beside him was the building security guard. He looked at Pei Chi-Chi with some difficulty. Such a ruckus could be considered as disturbing the residents, right? But looking at the CEO's expression, he seemed pretty happy. Wasn't the president supposed to be at Sun Feifei's concert? Why did he come here to see Miss Pei get drunk? It was Miss Pei who told the president that she was coming. Good heavens. Good heavens. The security guard's eyes widened as he watched Pei Chi-Chi smash the huge LCD screen in front of Xing Yuan with something unknown. A shattering sound was heard. Then, Tang Yu quickly ran over and hugged Pei Chi, bringing her away from there. Sparks flew everywhere. Xing Yuan's sign fell. Xing Yuan's sign was smashed. Xing Yuan's sign fell, however, Tang Yu was smiling happily. He hugged the drunk murderer in the winter night and buried his face in her little neck. Because he had drunk wine, it was very warm. "Little liar," he said angrily. He said angrily. Then, he moved his face and moved his lips from her cheek to her lips. Even though the weather was very cold, the temperature of their bodies was extremely high. Pei Chi was drunk. She was in a daze as he hugged her and kissed her. It was a little unreal. Her little hand was raised high and landed on his face. He quickly caught her hand and wrapped it around his neck. "I must be dreaming," she murmured. Tang Yu was panting, but he was still hugging her. Then, he raised his head and looked at Xing Yuan's screen. Chapter 332. He felt angry and amused at the same time. He really didn't know what to do with her. Stroking her fluffy hair, he pressed her into his embrace and said in a low voice, "It's a dream. Chi, let's go home, okay? Go home." She raised her head and stared at him with her black and white eyes. She looked exceptionally seductive. Tang Yu exhaled with difficulty. "Okay, let's go home." He squatted down slightly. Pei Chi was stunned for a moment before she lay on his back. Her little hands hugged his neck so tightly that she almost broke his neck. Tang Yu stood up straight and looked at the night sky. Then, he pressed his hands on her thighs and walked forward. "Pei Chi, can you still say that you don't love me? Can you still say that you don't care? Can you still say that you only have Jinrong in your heart? Little liar. This time, I'll let you say it yourself." She was drunk and thought that it was a dream, so she boldly pressed her face against his back. Her little hands restlessly unbuttoned 2 buttons on his shirt and reached in for warmth. Tang Yu froze for a moment and hit her but angrily. She moaned in pain and that was too much. He pursed his lips. He wanted to be stricter, but the corners of his lips still couldn't help but curve up. Ching was right. He had been poisoned by Pei Chi's chicken soup. On New Year's Eve, the gentle snow drifted down from the dark sky, adding some warmth to the winter night. Recently, it had always been snowing, but it just didn't pile up. Tang Yu carried Pei Chi and walked further and further away. Meanwhile, the security personnel were busy at work. Xing Yuan was smashed and the CEO ran away with the murderer on his back. What was going on? Pei Chi lay on Tang Yu's back and began to sing. Her singing was terrible, but fortunately, Tang Yu did not mind. Two tigers, run fast, run fast." She sang into his ear, and when she was done, she gave him a small bite. "Tang Yu, is my singing better, or is Sun Feifei's playing better?" "You sing well," he lied through his teeth. She giggled behind him and put her arms around his neck. "I knew you wouldn't like her," she said softly like a little girl. "Yes, I only like you." His voice was gentler than the night and the snow. As he spoke, he tilted his head and asked the little fellow behind him, "What about you? Do you like me?" "I like it." She hugged him tightly and buried her face in the back of his neck. "Don't tell anyone. Especially Tang Yu." Tang Yu's heart seemed to have been struck by something, as if a strong electric current had passed through his body. The electric current made him numb, and his heart was also soft and sour. "Chi, who am I?" His voice was hoarse. At this moment, a few snowflakes fell on the back of his neck. Pei Chi leaned over and sucked on the snowflakes. When her hot little mouth was on his neck, his body trembled, and he almost could not control himself. Of course, Pei Chi felt it. She giggled, and her little mouth did not stop kissing here and there. He exhaled a heavy and difficult breath to make sure that she was really drunk. He asked again in a hoarse voice, "Chi-Chi, who am I?" "Daddy." She hugged him very affectionately. On the other hand, Tang Yu's face darkened. Did she think that he was Pei Mingyi? How could she kiss Pei Mingyi like that? His face was completely dark, but she buried her whole face on his back. "Daddy Tang Yu." Chapter 333. Tang Yu turned his head sideways and used one hand to pull her little head over and kiss her fiercely. She struggled on the back, but she could not break free. She was in a mess, and her neck was in pain. He also knew that he was being impulsive. Many people were looking at them like that. He finally had enough kissing. He patted her fluffy little head as a compliment, as if he was treating a little pet. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. Tang Yu put her down, took off his coat and wrapped it around her, and carried her on his back again. It was not that they could not take the car, but he wanted to carry her on his back and continue walking. Pei Chi-Chi was a little sleepy on his back, but she could not bear to sleep, so she lay on his back and sang. Every song was unpleasant to listen to, but Tang Yu liked it very much. "Our Chi-Chi sings really well." He smiled and carried the little one on his back very lightly. After walking for 2 hours, they finally arrived at her apartment. After putting her down, Pei Chi-Chi blocked the door, and her little hand gently scratched his chest. She was drunk and her eyes were hazy. "This is my home. Tang Yu, shouldn't you be accompanying your fiancé?" Her expression was very childish, but her actions were a little seductive. Tang Yu stared at her and smiled faintly. "Chi-Chi, have you forgotten that you are the one dreaming now?" "Dreaming?" "Yes." She was indeed dreaming. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Tang Yu. Her gaze was fixated on him, like a little wolf looking at a meat bone. Tang Yu smiled faintly, and his hand was holding his coat. He said softly, "Chi-Chi, open the door." She then rummaged through her pocket, but she could not find the key. At that moment, Tang Yu's heart was breaking down. Imagine a man who had endured for 2 hours, and when he reached the door, he did not have the key. He suddenly pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately. She was barely breathing in his arms, and her little face was burning hot. The coldness outside had suddenly disappeared, and even the thin layer of snow on her clothes had become boiling hot. Tang Yu hugged her with one arm and buried her face in his chest. Then, he kicked her hard. The door opened, an innocent door. They stumbled into the room, kissing, and the door was kicked shut. Pei Chi-Chi was pressed down on the sofa and kissed. She sat in his arms, looking a mess. Her hair was all over the place, and her coat had been tossed aside, folded together with his coat. It was even wrapped around his shirt. She looked so messy, her hand pressed against his scalp. She felt as if she was standing in the clouds and was in a daze. Too much alcohol made her unable to tell if this was a dream or reality. Let's just treat it as a dream. She was drunk. As the kiss deepened, Tang Yu could no longer control himself. He exhaled deeply. "Chi-Chi, who am I?" "Daddy." She buried her face in his chest and nibbled on him. If he continued to tolerate it, he would not be a man. He carried her into the bathroom. Pei Chi-Chi was tortured to the point where she wished she was dead, but he still continued to ask, "Do you like Jinrong?" He held her little face and asked harshly. That little woman nodded her head in a silly manner. Yes. She used to like him. She was quite honest. Tang Yu was about to go mad with anger. She was really honest, and he hit her hard with his big hand. Chapter 334. Pei Chi-Chi looked at him and swallowed her saliva. "You look delicious." Tang Yu pursed his thin lips slightly and watched as she slowly squatted down. he had never known that Pei Chi had such a hobby. However, such a hobby was the best thing for a man. He pulled her fluffy hair. It was a little painful, but more than that, he was happy. On New Year's Eve, the fireworks outside rose one by one into the night sky and blossomed on the gorgeous black silk curtain. They were like two fishes, entangled with each other. This was probably what the ancients meant by the joy of fish in water. Tang Yu seemed like he didn't know what fatigue was, and Pei Chi looked like she didn't know what to eat next. Time was weary, but both of them were willing. When Pei Chi woke up, it was already 10:00 in the morning. When she got up, her body felt like it had been run over by a truck, and her head hurt. She held her forehead and looked around. There was nothing different. It was her bedroom, and everything was clean. Even she was wearing a set of pajamas. Did she drink too much? But in her mind, she vaguely remembered that she seemed to be with Tang Yu. It must be a hallucination. She lifted the blanket and got out of bed. She couldn't remember how she came back. When she walked to the bathroom to brush her teeth, her pajamas slid down. Her skin was fair and delicate, and there was no sign of being touched. However, Pei Chi still felt that her body was a little strange. As for what this strange feeling was, she couldn't explain it. She only felt a little tired and sore. What was more frightening was that her lips were a little numb, as if she had eaten something for a long time. She flipped through it carefully, and suddenly, a lot of unhealthy images flashed in her mind. In the misty bathroom, she knelt in front of Tang Yu, looking up at him. Pei Chi's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that she had really done this. She didn't rinse the toothpaste properly. She looked around the house and went to the bathroom to take a closer look, but she couldn't find anything. She bit her lips and covered her face. Maybe she really had a dream. When she went downstairs, her car was no longer there. She hailed a cab and headed to Xingyuan building. She saw her car there, but it was wrecked. She didn't know which brat had used paint to paint her car. Love. It's so full that I can't wipe it off. Pei Chi looked around and saw that the murderer was long gone. A short video was playing on Xingyuan's gigantic screen. She widened her eyes. It was actually Tang Yu. He leaned against the railing of the courtyard. He was wearing a gray sweater and looked very homey. He held a glass of red wine in his hand and said a few words of blessing with a smile. That short video kept repeating itself. Pei Chi's eyes felt a little hot. Was it because he was with Sun Feifei last night that he was in such a good mood? Pei Chi didn't know how long she watched it. Then, she kicked the car hard, and the car started to scream. She bit her lip and opened the car door. She drove the car through the streets, and it was quite eye-catching. She looked for a car wash, but after looking at it, they said that it couldn't be washed off and would have to be repainted. It was Chinese New Year, and the 4S store was probably closed. Moreover, she needed a car. She decided to bear with it. She drove around again. Since it was Chinese New Year, there weren't many people around. Chapter 335. As she drove, she started to feel a little lonely. Pei Chi wanted to go to the hospital to see Jinrong, but the nurse said that the Lins had taken Jinrong home. She stood at the entrance of the nursing home for a long time. Perhaps she would never see Jinrong in this lifetime. Later, she parked her car in the parking lot of the shopping mall and walked around. Only by walking non-stop would she not feel that the new year was so cold and cheerless. The LCD screens in the shopping mall were all playing Tang Yu's short videos. It was simply crazy. Pei Chi felt that he was everywhere. At a restaurant on the first floor, Pei Chi met Pei Huan. Standing outside the restaurant, she was hesitating about whether she should go in to eat when she saw Pei Huan. Pei Huan was with a middle-aged man. That man looked quite decent, good-looking, and had good taste. It was just that at this age, he was old enough to be Pei Huan's uncle, and it could be imagined that he had a family. Pei Chi had never thought that the arrogant Pei Huan would go down this path. She was a little stunned and stood there for a long time without being able to move away. At this moment, Pei Huan saw her and leaned over to say something to the man beside her. The man turned his head and saw Pei Chi. He smiled and got up to leave. Pei Huan waved at Pei Chi. Pei Chi hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. The waiter enthusiastically recommended her. Pei Chi said indifferently, "I have an appointment." She walked straight to Pei Huan and sat down opposite her. For a long time, the two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Finally, Pei Huan chuckled. "Long time no see." Pei Chi pursed her lips. "Yes. Long time no see." Pei Huan supported her chin with her beautiful hand and smiled. "Pei Chi, are you going to ask me who the man was just now?" "All right then, who is that man?" Pei Chi was expressionless. Pei Huan's smile was a little charming, which did not match her age. She played with the wine glass in one hand and spat out 2 words from her red lips. "Godfather." Pei Chi remained silent. "Pei Chi, you are a pure girl from the Pei family. Don't tell me you don't know what a godfather means." Pei Huan smiled like a cat. "It means that you are my father in the day and you can do whatever you want at night." She smiled and became a little annoyed. She waved at the waiter and ordered a few expensive dishes. Then she looked at Pei Chi and said, "See. Even without the Pei family and the Lin family, I was still living a good life. Pei Chi, what you have, I have. What you don't have, I also have." As she spoke, she took out a long and thin cigarette from her bag, lit it skillfully, and puffed out a cloud of smoke. This reminded Pei Chi of Zhao Ku. Zhao Ku was also like this. She could smoke very seductively. "You must have had a hard time without Tang Yu, right? I also saw that Tang Yu has a new girlfriend, and she looks pretty good." Pei Huan felt a little happy in his heart. "Why are you looking at me like that? Do you think that I have fallen?" "Pei Chi, stop it. We sell it all the same." Pei Chi looked down and smiled. "Yes, it's the same. It's the same. Try smoking. After smoking, you will forget Lin Jinrong, forget Tang Yu, and forget everything about the Pei family." Pei Huan stared at Pei Chi with her slender eyes. She leaned forward and put the cigarette butt in front of Pei Chi. Pei Chi felt choked. Chapter 336. Pei Chi was shocked. "So what? Pei Chi, do you still think you're that spotless little saint from before? Without Tang Yu, you're just a piece of meat on the cutting board. When those men want to eat you up, you won't be able to escape." Pei Huan sneered as she put the cigarette to her lips. Pei Chi only felt sorry for her. "All right, I'm in a good mood today. Let's have a meal together. Speaking of which, we're considered a family." Pei Huan put out the cigarette. "Let's eat. It's quite pitiful to see you alone." Only Pei Chi's loneliness could comfort her. It made her feel that she, Pei Huan, was not the most pitiful one. She, Pei Chi, had fallen in love with Tang Yu, but she was also abandoned. Pei Huan looked as if she had seen through the world. She pointed out, "Men are all the same. They only covet your young body. When they pamper you, you're a baby. When they're done playing with you, you're nothing." Pei Chi remained silent. She only felt that Pei Huan had changed a lot. "Do you know? I'm in the entertainment industry now. That man just now is the vice president of King Entertainment. He can make me famous. Pei Huan said nonchalantly. I just need to sleep with him. Really? Pei Chi stared into her eyes. Is that what you want? What about your love for Jinrong? Pei Huan's eyes were originally smiling, but now they became a little sharp. Love? Pei Chi, don't be funny. I love him, but does he love me? He gave you his heart and his life. What did he leave for me? A child. I'm so young. Am I supposed to watch over him for the rest of my life? What if Jinrong wakes up one day? Pei Chi closed her eyes. Pei Huan, won't you regret it then? Pei Huan was stunned for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. How is that possible? He won't wake up. With that said, she chuckled. So what if he's awake? He still likes you. And that man just now, he can give me happiness. Being with him, I can taste the happiness of a woman, instead of being a widow with Lin Jinrong. Pei Chi, do you know what it feels like to be a widow? Do you know how it feels to be left out by your husband? Don't you know that Lin Jinrong only touched me once? Isn't that ironic? Pei Huan raised her head. From the moment I aborted the child, I told myself that I would never love him again. Pei Chi was speechless. She and Pei Huan sat face to face and ordered a table full of dishes, but neither of them touched anything. Before leaving, Pei Huan said, Pei Chi, the hatred between the two of us will never be resolved in this lifetime. Pei Chi looked at the boundless night and smiled faintly. Pei Huan, you could have lived another life. She was the one who had cut off her own path. It was her willfulness that had caused her to live such a miserable life. When Pei Huan went out to get her car, she saw a car that had been sprayed messily. It was written all over in English. As she looked at it, her eyes felt a little warm, because it was all written with the word love. However, when she saw what was inside, it turned out to be Pei Chi's car. Then, Pei Huan's gaze froze. Slowly, bitterly, she smiled. Pei Chi, you're such a fool. You actually don't know how much Tang Yu loves you. On the chassis of the car, there were two inconspicuous English letters, Ty. Pei Chi, I won't tell you. Just let you struggle. Pei Huan raised her head and there were some tears in her eyes. Chapter 337. Pei Chi sat there for a long time, so long that the waiter asked her softly, Miss, do you need a takeaway? She turned her head and looked at the waiter, her gaze a little dazed. Miss, do you need a takeaway? The waiter was especially patient when faced with such a beautiful girl. Pei Chi pursed her lips, looked at the dishes that had not been touched, and said calmly, take it to the takeaway. Although she was very hungry, she did not have much of an appetite after meeting Pei Huan. Although she did not like Pei Huan, and just as Pei Huan had said, the hatred would never be resolved in this lifetime, Pei Huan was still her father's child. No matter how ruthless Pei Chi was, she still felt a little pity for Pei Huan. She walked out with the lunchbox and did not get her car. Instead, she wandered on the streets. Behind her, there seemed to be someone following her. When Pei Chi turned around, the person was gone. After walking 2 streets, Pei Chi placed the lunchbox on a platform in a green belt and continued to walk forward. She walked to the corner and stopped. She looked in that direction. A woman with a little girl walked over quietly and picked up the lunchbox. The woman was wearing very old clothes, and so was the little girl. At this moment, the woman opened the lunchbox and carefully fed the food inside to the little girl. Probably because she had never eaten such delicious food before, the little girl ate in a hurry, and the woman was a little anxious. Pei Chi looked from afar and saw a small car next to the woman. There were some purified water bottles on it. The little girl had probably been exposed to the elements for a long time. Her skin was a little dark, and her eyes were even more distinct. As she ate, she looked up and saw Pei Chi. Pei Chi pursed her lips and smiled warmly at her. Then, she gestured for her to wait there. Pei Chi quickly ran to the mall and bought a beautiful rabbit the size of a child. She took out her card and withdrew about 100,000 yuan from all the teller machines. It was packed thickly in a bag and carefully wrapped in another layer. She ran out, but the little girl was still standing there, waiting for her. Pei Chi slowed down and ran over again. She stuffed the soft rabbit and the heavy bag into the little girl's arms. She said in a low voice, "Happy New Year." The little girl's face was red. Pei Chi reached out and patted her head. "You have to listen to your mother." The woman at the side stood far away. After Pei Chi left, she walked over and opened the things in her daughter's arms. She was shocked to see that it was a neatly tied-up bag of money. There were about 100,000 yuan in it. He couldn't accept it. But if he searched everywhere, where would he find Pei Chi? "Mommy." The little girl hugged the rabbit and said softly, "Mommy, can we rest today?" The woman hugged her child tightly. Her lips were dry and cracked, but she still kissed her daughter solemnly. "All right, Mommy will rest for a day. Now, I'll take Ruoro to buy some new clothes." After they left, Pei Chi walked out from behind. She was a little jealous and envious. She had never been hugged by any woman before, and she didn't know what it felt like. She had only been hugged by Tang Yu. Chapter 338. She looked down and saw that it was a call from Tang Xan. After some thought, she picked it up. Tang Xan said in a sobbing voice, "Chi, my dad and mom are fighting. They're so fierce." They had fought before, but not like today. Pei Chi was stunned. Tang Xan continued, "I heard that dad slapped mom a few times because of some photo. Chi, dad has never hit mom like that before." Pei Chi was speechless. She didn't want to get involved in Zhao Ke's affairs. "Chi, can you bring me to your place for a few days?" Tang Xan begged. Afraid that she wouldn't agree, she quickly said, "Brother has to stay with auntie. Besides, he has a girlfriend now." Tang Xan stopped. She knew that she had said the wrong thing. Pei Chi didn't mind. She smiled faintly. "What if your dad and mom are worried?" Tang Xan pretended to be indifferent. "It's fine. I'll tell them that I'm at my brother's place. It's not like this hasn't happened before. They can't control me when they fight." Pei Chi sighed. In the end, she agreed, maybe it was loneliness. She went to get her car and drove to Yanhui, where she had arranged to meet Tang Xan. Yanhui. Tang Xan packed a small bag and carefully walked down the stairs. She didn't want Tang Ziyuan and Zhao Ke to see her. Tang Ziyuan's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed Zhao Ke's hair and forced her to look up. "Look carefully. The photo is not of you." "Who is it?" Zhao Ke swallowed hard and didn't dare to make a sound. She saw a photo of herself lying on the bed. She was naked and only wrapped in a bath towel. Her face was a little blurry, but those who knew her could tell that it was her. This photo was published in the entertainment headlines today. Tang Ziyuan was also a person who liked to read entertainment news. When he saw it, he slapped Zhao Ke a few times. He was still angry. He, Tang Ziyuan, was a respectable man. Although he knew that Zhao Ke was a little unbearable in the past and had been with a few men, he didn't care because he didn't love her. Now that she had Tang Xan and her beauty, all she had to do was to behave herself. Moreover, even if she was cheating on him, as long as she didn't embarrass herself, he wouldn't care. They had been together for a long time. But now, he had caused such a huge commotion. Would he still have any face left in the future? Tang Ziyuan pressed Zhao Ke's head to the front of the newspaper and let her read it herself. Zhao Ke's hair was in a mess. She looked like a crazy woman, her lips trembling as she looked at the photo. She recognized it. It was the place where she and Rong Lei had their rendezvous. This photo should be several years old. This bastard. Last time, he said he would delete all the photos. Just because he had asked her for 1 million 2 days ago and she had refused to give it to him, he had set her up like this. Zhao Ke gritted her teeth. Ziyuan, this is all in the past. It's not like you don't know. Tang Ziyuan slapped him again, things from the past. Zhao Ke, do you think I'm stupid? Isn't the ring on your finger a wedding ring? Zhao Ke couldn't deny it anymore. Chapter 339. Zhao Ke knew that Tang Ziyuan cared about Tang Xian, but he cared more about his reputation. Even if she didn't die this time, she would lose a layer of skin. She couldn't live without the title of Mrs. Tang. She didn't want to live the life she had before. Thinking of those days, thinking of the gray walls, the worn-out furniture, and the dirty man, it was even worse than killing Zhao Ke. She knelt in front of Tang Ziyuan and confessed, Ziyuan, I was wrong. I promise that I will never see him again, and I will never have these pictures again. Tang Ziyuan grabbed her hair and lifted her in front of him. He narrowed his eyes and looked at her. Suddenly, he threw her away. You're on your own. Zhao Ke lay on the ground and didn't get up for a long time. She just coughed. After a long time, she pushed herself up and walked to Tang Xian's room. But it was empty. What about Tang Xian? Where did she go? Zhao Ke's heart was in a mess. Tang Ziyuan didn't divorce her because of Tang Xian. Otherwise, he would have insisted on remarrying Lin Yun last time, so she wanted to hold on to her daughter tightly. As long as Tang Xian was there and Tang Xian called him daddy, Tang Ziyuan wouldn't bear to divorce her. Zhao Ke looked for Tang Xian like a madwoman. She called her number, but it was turned off. Finally, she called Tang Yu. Tang Yu was surprised to receive her call. He looked at his mother without batting an eyelid, then walked outside and said, Wait a moment, I'll send someone to take a look. In the past, when Tang Xian ran away from home, she would go to Xia City. But now that he didn't live in Xia City, Tang Xian naturally wouldn't go there. He hung up, thought for a moment, and dialed Pei Chi-Chi's number. When Pei Chi-Chi picked up the phone, she saw Tang Xian running towards her. She looked at the number and answered, Hello. Tang Yu's voice was especially cold. Is Tang Xian with you? Pei Chi-Chi saw that Tang Xian had opened the car door and was sitting beside her. Yes, she's with me. Tang Yu was silent for a moment. Got it. He hung up the phone with just 3 words. Pei Chi-Chi looked at the phone, not sure what he meant. Got it. So he didn't want her to send Tang Xian back. He put down his phone and looked at Tang Xian. Tang Xian's hands were clasped together, as if she was trying to please him. Your brother is calling. Pei Chi-Chi asked, Do you want me to send you to him? It's okay. Tang Xian said anxiously, Big brother is always with Auntie during the new year. Auntie won't be happy if I go. Pei Chi-Chi looked at her and didn't say anything. She started the car. Tang Xian immediately buckled her seatbelt and said fawningly, Chi-Chi, your car film looks really cool. Where did you put it? It was scribbled on, not pasted. Pei Chi-Chi glanced at her. Aren't you afraid that your parents will be worried? Xian played with Xian looked down, they can Chang's Shan. Tang can't do it. Can you let me stay with you for a few days? She begged Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She drove back to where she lived. When the car stopped, Tang Axian was sure that she was safe. She sat still and said softly, "What did brother say?" Chapter 340. Pei Chi glanced at her. "Nothing. So I can stay with you?" Tang Axian asked carefully. Pei Chi saw many little stars in her eyes, and a sense of kinship rose in her heart. She thought that with Xiao Ku around, she wouldn't have too many feelings for Tang Axian. But Tang Axian was different. She was as weak as a small animal, which made people want to love her. Pei Chi reached out and gently touched Tang Axian's little head. "It should be fine for now." Tang Axian was satisfied even if it was for now. She opened the car door and hopped out. Then, she took out her phone and took selfies with Pei Chi's car. But she also saw that her mother had called. Tang Axian chose to ignore it. When Pei Chi walked over, Tang Axian put away her phone. "Chi, I've posted it on my friend circle. Don't worry, I blocked it. She won't be able to see it." Pei Chi was annoyed and amused at the sight of her trying to please her. She brought her to her apartment and settled her down. When she pushed the door open, Tang Axian cheered and jumped on the sofa with all her might. She had never been so wild before, and her pale face was flushed. Pei Chi brought her bag into the guest room. When she came out, Tang Axian was lying on the sofa and said softly, "I like this sofa the most. It's so comfortable." Pei Chi shook her head and walked into the kitchen. Then, she came out again. "Tang Axian, I'm going to the supermarket to buy some ingredients. Are you coming with me or staying at home?" Tang Axian jumped up. "Of course I'm going with you." When she got into the car again, Tang Axian lowered her head and played with her phone. She saw a comment from Tang Yu in her friend's circle. "Where is it?" Tang Axian stole a glance at Chi. Seeing that she was focused on driving, she sent a private message to Tang Yu. "I'm going to the supermarket with Chi. Chi wants to cook for me." After she sent the message, she waited for a long time, but nothing happened. Really? There was no reaction at all. She thought that her brother loved Chi so much that he couldn't forget her. It turned out that when there was a new person, they would forget the old one. How was that Sun Feifei better than Chi? She was beautiful, but she was like a wooden beauty. She couldn't be compared to her Chi. Tang Axian pouted and did not say anything. She was a little disappointed. Actually, she wanted to call her brother over. She hoped that her brother and Chi could be together. After all, Tang Axian was still a child. She couldn't keep her thoughts to herself. After a while, she asked pitifully, "Chi, do you really not like my brother?" Pei Chi did not reply. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "Tang Axian, don't ask questions like that again. Your brother has a girlfriend now. It'll be bad if you misunderstand." Tang Axian buried her head and looked outside, sighing, "Chi, if I were you, I'd definitely like my brother." In Tang Axian's heart, Tang Yu was the embodiment of perfection. Pei Chi smiled and did not say anything. Tang Axian looked out of the window and suddenly felt a little sad. She saw Chi and her brother together. How loving they were. Could it be that none of this was true? If that was not true, then what was true? But no one could answer Tang Axian's question. She could only look outside. Chapter 341. Pei Chi brought Tang Axian to the supermarket. For the first time, Tang Axian felt that it was a fresh experience. She even asked Pei Chi to push her in a small cart as if she was a child. Pei Chi pinched her little face and agreed in the end. Tang Axayan stood in the cart and ordered. She shouted excitedly, Chi-Chi, go over there and have a look. Look at the chilies there. They look so pretty. You know they are chilies. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and took a box. She then picked some seafood, meat, and vegetables. Tang Axayan's mouth watered. Chi-Chi, are you really going to cook for me? Tang Axayan whispered. Pei Chi-Chi nodded and focused on picking. She even bought some daily necessities for Tang Axayan. Tang Axayan was still a child. She was forced to use the princess series in the past. She was already tired of looking at the pink ones. She picked some cartoon ones to her heart's content. Her favorite was the bunny one. Pei Chi-Chi satisfied her. She was a child after all. For some reason, Pei Chi-Chi's heart softened when she saw Tang Axayan's happy face. If she was happy, he would be happy as well. She shook her head and laughed at herself. She pushed Tang Axayan to the living area. When she was about to pick a pair of slippers, she saw someone she shouldn't have seen. Tang Yu and Sun Feifei were there too. Sun Feifei's fingers were clasped on Tang Yu's arm. She was holding a pair of pink slippers in her hand. She was looking up and talking to Tang Yu as if she was asking for his opinion. Pei Chi-Chi stopped in her tracks. Tang Axayan called out to her brother, but she acted as if she didn't see Sun Feifei. Tang Yu looked over. He glanced at Pei Chi-Chi's face and finally at Tang Axayan. He asked calmly, why did you come out? Tang Axayan was a little angry. In the past, when Chi-Chi was with her brother, she would throw herself at him. No matter if it was Chi-Chi or her brother, she would always be able to hug one of them. But now, Sun Feifei was clinging to her brother like an octopus. I want to celebrate the new year with Chi-Chi. Tang Axayan pouted. Chi-Chi has no one by her side. I have to accompany her. She was angry at Tang Yu too. Brother, you should accompany the others. I'll be fine with Chi-Chi. In the past, if she was angry, Tang Yu would coax her. But this time, Tang Yu actually nodded. That's good too. I'll pick you up. Also, I told your mother that you'll be with me. Axayan, was Axayan's words. Tang Axayan had failed to achieve her goal, so she bit her lips and sulked. Pei Chi-Chi's gaze was somewhat dazed. She kept staring at him, forgetting the existence of her surroundings. Tang Yu acted as if he didn't see Pei Chi-Chi. He looked at the slippers in Sun Feifei's hands and said indifferently, I'll take this pair. The two of them left. Tang Axayan was annoyed. Chi-Chi, forget it. I'll find a better man than my brother. When the two of them left, Tang Axayan was annoyed by their lovey-dovey display. Chi-Chi, forget it. I'll find a better man than my brother. They left. Tang Axayan was annoyed by their love. Chi-Chi, forget it. Find a better man than my brother. In this city, she might see them often. She thought she should get used to it. But when they reached the checkout area, Pei Chi-Chi still wasn't used to it. She bumped into Tang Yu and Sun Feifei. They seemed to be waiting for the checkout. Sun Feifei stood in front of Tang Yu. Tang Yu put one hand on her waist and the other hand reached for two boxes. Chapter 342. Pei Chi-Chi was even more dazed. She stared at the things in his hands and did not come back to her senses for a long time. Although she knew that he and Sun Feifei would get together sooner or later, she did not expect it to be so soon. Her heart ached, but there was another voice that said to her, Pei Chi-Chi, isn't this your own choice? Yes, it was her own choice. She looked down and did not want to look at it. After she paid and took the things down, Tang Axayan walked beside her in silence. Obviously, Tang Axayan saw it too. Chi-Chi. Tang Axian called her softly and pulled her sleeve. Pei Chi forced a smile. It's okay. She carried the things and walked straight ahead. Tang Axian followed behind with her mouth agape. Then, she covered her eyes. With a thud, Pei Chi bumped into a human wall, and the voice that greeted him was one that he could not be more familiar with. She looked up and saw his handsome face, his handsome chin, his strong Adam's apple, and the hickeys on it. Hickeys. Something flashed in Pei Chi's mind. She seemed to remember something. She remembered that ball of heat that was like a raging fire. However, she immediately felt sad. It was left by Sun Feifei. She was a little dazed. She could not move her eyes away and her body did not move. Only she knew that her legs were weak. She could not move at all. Tang Yu supported her politely and pushed her away from him. It was as if he did not notice her gaze. Then, he looked at Tang Axian. I'll pick you up tonight. Tang Axian was a little anxious. Didn't they agree to let her stay here? Just as she opened her mouth, Tang Yu walked towards Sun Feifei. The two of them got into the car together. Before Sun Feifei got in, she turned around and smiled at Pei Chi. Tang Axian said unhappily, "That woman is so sneaky. It's like she's showing off." She snorted lightly. If it weren't for her Chi, how could Sun Feifei, that wooden beauty, get her turn? Pei Chi didn't say anything. She carried the bags to her car. Before she started the car, she looked at Tang Axian and said seriously, "Your brother made his own choices. Don't ruin them." Tang Axian wanted to say something, but she swallowed her words. After returning home, Pei Chi quietly cooked. Tang Axian could feel that she was in a bad mood, so she tried to cheer her up, but Pei Chi only smiled faintly. "Chi, I think the one you like is my brother," Tang Axian suddenly said with certainty. As she spoke, she stared straight at Pei Chi, as if she wanted to confirm it. Pei Chi's fingers paused for a moment. She looked at Tang Axian for a moment, then smiled faintly without saying anything. Tang Axian jumped down from the counter and wrapped her arms around Chi-Chi's arm. "Chi, isn't it?" Pei Chi pursed her lips. "Nonsense." Tang Axian moved her body closer and said childishly, "Chi, do you dare to look at my eyes? If you dare to look at me for more than a minute and say that you don't like my brother, I'll believe you." Lame. Pei Chi didn't want to play such childish games with her. Tang Axian pestered her. Chi, Pei Chi ignored her, so she jumped left and right like a little monkey. While they were fooling around, Pei Chi's phone rang. She wiped her hands and said, "Tang Axian, stop fooling around. The matter between me and your brother is over." As she spoke, she walked towards the living room. Tang Axian followed her like a shadow. Pei Chi looked at the caller ID and hesitated. Should she pick it up, because it was Tang Yu? Chapter 343. Tang Axian pinched her throat and mimicked what she had just said. "Tang Axian, I'm done with your brother." Pei Chi slapped her hand and glared at her before picking up the phone. "What's up?" Her tone was indifferent. The voice on the other end was even colder. "Address." "Huh?" She was stunned. He seemed to be getting impatient. "Your address." "I'll come and pick Tang Axian up in a bit." Tang Axian heard it too. She was disappointed. Her brother had promised to let her stay here for a few days. Pei Chi was also surprised. She looked at Tang Axian and finally gave him the address. "Mr. Tang is so pretentious. We've been here for a night and he still doesn't know the address." As soon as he finished speaking, the other side hung up the phone mercilessly. Pei Chi held the phone. She was actually afraid. She was afraid that Tang Yu would bring Sun Feifei over. If that happened, how could she endure it? Tang Axian pouted and pretended to be dead on the sofa. Tang Axian, listen to your brother. Pei Chi was helpless. Her relationship with Tang Yu was strained. She couldn't speak for Tang Axian. Moreover, if she forced Tang Axian to stay here, it would seem like she had ulterior motives. Tang Axian's voice was muffled and couldn't be heard clearly. Looking at her, Pei Chi's heart softened. After all, Tang Axian was still a child. She patted her. At least we can have a good meal. Tang Axian couldn't bear to see Pei Chi suffer. No matter how disappointed she was, she still got up and clung to Pei Chi. It was already 6:00 in the evening when dinner was ready. There were 4 stir-fried dishes, 2 cold dishes and a soup pot on the small dining table. Although they were home-cooked dishes, they looked delicious. Tang Axian forgot about what happened earlier. She secretly picked up a piece of meat. Pei Chi patted her. Use chopsticks. Tang Axian stuck out her tongue and asked, "Can I have some wine?" Pei Chi glanced at her. "Are you of age?" Tang Axian puffed her chest out. "Pei Chi, you're not much older than me." Pei Chi was amused. Just as she was laughing, the doorbell rang. She paused and then realized something. He looked down at the time. It was only a little over 6:00. Is he here to pick up Tang Axian now? He glanced at Tang Axian, who was curled up like a little mouse, and shook his head. "I'll go open the door." When he opened the door, he saw Tang Yu. He had already changed into a new set of clothes. Compared to when he was with Sun Feifei in the afternoon, he now appeared more casual. He was wearing a black coat over a gray high-collared coat. The only thing that remained unchanged was his long, slender, and powerful legs. Pei Chi looked down. "Are you taking her away now?" She could not make Tang Axian stay, but she hoped that Tang Axian could have a meal with her. It was the new year and she had no family. Tang Axian was the only family she had left. She thought that he would answer, yes or no. But that was not what he said. He asked her in a deep voice, "What about you? Do you want me to take her away or not?" Pei Chi looked up and stared into his deep, dark eyes. She did not speak for a long time. His long legs were already in front of her. Tang Axian whimpered, "Brother, look at how good Chi-Chi's cooking is." She looked at Tang Yu pleadingly. She did not want to leave. Tang Yu sat down at the dining table. He looked at the food and smiled. "It's really good." Chapter 344. "Do you mind if I eat with you?" he asked emotionlessly. But when he looked at Tang Axian, his gaze was warm. Pei Chi felt a wave of weakness. He wants to eat with them. It's the new year. Is he sure he doesn't want to accompany his mother or Sun Feifei? She didn't move. Tang Yu frowned. "Miss Pei." Those 3 words widened the distance between them. Pei Chi walked over. "I'll go get the food for you." Tang Axian shrieked, "I want a drink." As soon as she finished speaking, Tang Yu glanced at her, and Tang Axian didn't dare to say anything else. She curled up like a pitiful child. Pei Chi didn't know why, but she felt like a mother hen protecting her chicks. She looked at Tang Yu. "You don't have to be so fierce to her. I'm teaching my sister a lesson." "What does that have to do with you, Miss Pei?" He looked at her coldly. Pei Chi pursed her lips. "It doesn't matter, but this is my house." Tang Axian secretly gave her 100 thumbs up. Chi was the first person who dared to challenge her brother's authority. However, Pei Chi-Chi's leopard courage was only so little. After saying that, he escaped into the kitchen. Without her support, Tang Axian was very careful, afraid of angering the devil. You want to stay here? Tang Yu's tone was indifferent, as if he was asking casually. Tang Axian immediately nodded like a puppy. Tang Yu glanced at her and didn't say anything else. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Tang Yu became even bolder. Pei Chi-Chi came over with the food and asked for a drink. Pei Chi-Chi thought that Tang Axian would be leaving soon, so she went to get a bottle of red wine. Chi-Chi, you drink too. Tang Axian didn't dare to drink alone. Her brother was right beside her, staring at her like a wolf. Pei Chi-Chi poured a small glass for herself but not for Tang Yu. He had to drive later. She had no idea that she was the one he wanted to let go of. The atmosphere was still tense, but fortunately, Tang Axian was talkative enough. One of them was eating, while the other was sipping wine. As they sipped, they drank too much. Tang Axian knew that her body was weak, so she put down the glass after drinking half of it. On the other hand, Pei Chi-Chi drank the entire bottle of red wine. As Tang Axian spoke, she noticed Pei Chi-Chi's blushing face. Chi-Chi, your face is so red. Tang Axian touched her carefully. She was a little worried. Red wine won't go bad. Tang Yu looked at his sister indifferently and then scolded softly, I'll help her in when you're done cleaning up. Tang Axian was stunned. I'll help Chi-Chi in. She didn't dare to finish her sentence. Tang Yu looked at her. She gathered her courage and said, Big brother already has a girlfriend. Tang Yu remained calm. You're afraid that I'll take advantage of her. Tang Axian nodded vigorously, like a little wolf dog protecting its master. You're thinking too much. He used his authority as a brother. Clean up. Tang Axian looked at him. Was her brother not going to leave? She pursed her lips and began to negotiate. Let me stay, and let Big Brother help Chi-Chi in. Tang Yu looked at her, I know you just want to take advantage of Chi-Chi. You don't like Sun Fei-Fei at all. Tang Axian shouted. Sometimes, one had to admire a child's intuition. She was always right. Chapter 345. Tang Axian wanted to scream, but she did not dare to. What? She was supposed to be spending New Year's with Chi-Chi. Why was it her brother? Her brother already had a girlfriend. How could he be alone with Chi-Chi in the same bedroom? Tang Axian thought about it. She was still worried, so she tiptoed to Pei Chi-Chi's bedroom door. She opened the door slightly and took a peek. She was completely stunned. What was her brother doing? She saw her brother putting Chi-Chi on the bed and kissing Chi-Chi. Her brother already had a girlfriend, but he kissed Chi-Chi. Tang Axian only dared to take a peek and did not dare to look anymore. She had a feeling that her brother would skin her alive if he found out that she was peeking at him. Tang Xinzi left and obediently went to clean up. In the bedroom, Tang Yu exhaled with difficulty and left Pei Chi-Chi's little mouth. Perhaps it was because of the alcohol, her whole body was fragrant and soft. Tang Yu's gaze seemed to be on fire. Even though he had sex with her a few times last night, it was too long. How could one night make up for it? He pressed her hair with his palm and looked at her squinting eyes. Her slightly swollen lips were slightly parted, and the breath she exhaled was sweet. Especially when her petite body was moving up and down due to the difficulty of breathing, it was very, very seductive. Tang Yu could not help but lower his head and kiss her little mouth. He did not dare to kiss her forcefully but only lightly sipped on it. It was as if he was treating a precious treasure. She had drunk too much, but she was still somewhat sober. Who was he? Was he Tang Yu? Why did he kiss her? He already had Sun Fei-Fei, why did he treat her like this? What did he take her for? Her little hand struggled for a while, but she could not break free from his kiss. In the end, she was a little anxious and slapped his face. At that moment, the air seemed to have frozen. She turned her little face to the side and panted heavily. He seemed to have sobered up a little, but he immediately pressed both her hands down angrily and kissed her fiercely. Pei-Chi-Chi's eyes widened. Under her gaze, he kissed her on the lips, his 10 fingers intertwined as he struggled hopelessly, but he couldn't break free. His body felt heavy, and the thin material of his clothes couldn't block anything. She felt even more dizzy. She couldn't tell if this was real or fake. Or was it a dream? Tang Yu did not plan to take her. No matter how hungry he was, he had to consider Tang Xian's presence. He reluctantly left her lips. He felt that he was quite despicable to get her drunk just to kiss her. He propped himself up and caressed her red lips with his slender fingers. He stared at her rosy lips for a long time, caressed them, and couldn't help but kiss them lightly for a while. He raised his hand to look at his watch. About 10 minutes had passed. He rolled to the side and calmed himself down before tidying up his clothes and walking out. Tang Xian sat on the sofa and hugged her pillow. She saw her brother coming out of the room, dressed neatly. She thought of a word, a beast in human clothing. Tang Xian's long hair was loose and draped over her shoulders. She hugged a pillow and looked very fragile. Tang Yu coughed softly and walked over. Watching TV. Brother, are you not planning to leave? Tang Xian asked him carefully. Tang Yu casually sat down. With a sweep of his long arm, he pulled Tang Xian to his side. He hugged her with one arm and reached out to rub her face. He grunted softly. Tang Xian's eyes widened. She knew it. Chapter 346. Tang Yu changed the topic and pursed his lips. You and Chi-Chi seemed to talk about everything. Tang Xian crawled over carefully and half knelt beside him. She placed her hand on his thigh and propped her chin up. I won't say anything that I shouldn't say. For example, you kissed Chi-Chi. Tang Yu lowered his head and looked at his sister threateningly. Tang Xian flinched. I promise I won't say anything, but brother, Tang Xian suddenly stopped talking. She stared at Tang Yu's neck. Her gaze turned strange. She touched it with her hand and bit her lip. No. You were bitten by a vixen. Chi-Chi can't be with you. Tang Yu couldn't help but laugh. He caressed his neck and chuckled. Tang Xian, how did you know it was a vixen? It can't be Chi-Chi. Tang Xian pouted and said unhappily. Tang Yu smiled but didn't say anything. Tang Xian looked up and was stunned. It can't be. Chi-Chi bit me. Tang Yu patted the back of her hand. You said that you shouldn't say anything. Don't you remember? Tang Xian swallowed her saliva and nodded after a while. She remembered. Brother was too evil. She used to think that he was a beast, but now she felt that he was worse than a beast. If you say anything, I'll send you back now. The brother was bullying his sister. Tang Xian nodded with tears in her eyes. Boo-hoo, big brother is so bad. Tang Yu pressed Tang Xian's head into his arms. Let's watch TV. We'll sleep early after that. She didn't want to sleep early. She wanted to sleep with Chi-Chi. But Tang Xian didn't dare to say it. She stared at her brother, the great demon king. At 9 o'clock, Tang Yu said on time, take your medicine and go to sleep. Tang Xian was touched. She grabbed his hand and whispered, Big brother, I don't have long to live, right? Nonsense. He patted her little head. It can be cured. Isn't it fine now? Tang Xian sniffled. I heard Mommy and Daddy arguing. Mommy said I wouldn't live past 20. Tang Yu frowned and felt another layer of anger towards Xiao Ku. How old was Tang Xian? She was already terrified of this illness, yet she was still talking about it. Tang Yu's heart softened a little. He reached out and patted his sister's head. Silly girl, as long as there's a suitable bone marrow, it can be cured. Tang Xian pouted and hugged her knees. She looked hurt. Brother, I've been waiting for so many years. Is it because I can't wait any longer? He smiled and pulled Tang Xian into his arms. Brother, can you kiss me? Tang Xian looked up at him. I might not even get a boyfriend in the future. Brother, give me a kiss. Just take it that I've had a boyfriend. Tang Xian clung onto him pitifully. Actually, Tang Yu was feeling a little down. He loved Tang Xian, but he didn't take much care of her. He couldn't bear to reject her wish. He kissed her forehead and said in a hoarse voice, Our Tang Xian will definitely get better. Tang Xian whimpered and lay on his lap, not saying a word. Her brother had never doted on her like this before. At this moment, she felt very happy. Tang Xian pressed her face against Tang Yu's and hugged him. Brother, we'll always be together with Chi-Chi, okay? She didn't hear what Tang Yu said. Chapter 347. Tang Xian was sleepy. Tang Yu did not have the heart to wake her up, so he tiptoed to the guest room and found her backpack. He took out the medicine, poured some water and fed it to Tang Xian. Tang Xian groggily called out to her brother. I'm here. He smiled warmly and carried her to the guest room. He placed Tang Xian on the bed and helped her remove her jacket and trousers. Tang Yu did all of this as if he was taking care of a child. He even softened his heart. He wondered if his and Chi-Chi's children would be like Tang Xian. Chi-Chi was not a boring person. It was just that the environment she grew up in was a little twisted, so she was cold to outsiders. He covered Tang Xian with the blanket and sat for a while before getting up. Before he left, he heard Tang Xian moaning in her sleep. Chi-Chi, I don't want to go back. Tang Yu laughed in his heart. He did not know why Tang Xian liked Chi-Chi so much. He turned around, wanting to comfort Tang Xian, but when he turned around, he was a little stunned. Tang Xian was drooling. She's so old, and she's still drooling. Tang Yu shook his head and took a tissue to wipe it off for her. Then, he closed the door for her and walked out. When he reached the living room, there were people sleeping on both sides. The two little ones. He held his forehead and laughed self-deprecatingly. It was obvious that he didn't want them to spend the new year alone, so he left his mother behind. Now, one was asleep and the other was drunk. He was the only one left. He stood there for a while and looked at the television. Even if he was alone, his heart was filled with satisfaction. At midnight, he turned off the television and walked into Pei Chi-Chi's bedroom. He removed the sweater and pants, leaving only a pair of black boots. He lifted the blanket and lay down beside her. Pei Chi-Chi was originally curled up, but when she felt his warmth, she automatically curled up and buried her whole body in his arms, her little face resting on his shoulder. Tang Yu looked down at her in the dim light. Her long hair was like ink on the pillow and wrapped around his body. Her little face was slightly red from drinking too much, and her body was warm. His fingers slowly fell on her back, and there was an unquestionable gentleness in his eyes. Pei Chi-Chi, you still dare to say that you don't love me? He held her in his arms and closed his eyes. This was the first time he slept with her without any desire. Late at night, the fireworks were still going off outside. Tang Yu opened his dark eyes and said softly, Chi-Chi, Happy New Year. And, little fool, you can't escape. When Pei Chi woke up, she felt that her waist was a little sore, and the sunlight was dazzling. She forced her eyes open and was stunned. In front of him was Tang Yu. It was a naked Tang Yu. Even if he was wearing a pair of underpants, it couldn't hide anything. And at this moment, she was nestled in his arms, her little mouth was facing his shoulder, and more importantly, there was her saliva on it. Pei Chi-Chi's eyes widened. She wanted to move away, but the moment she moved, her body became empty, and she fell straight off the bed. A big hand caught her, and then she fell into his arms. He groaned, probably because of the pain. Pei Chi-Chi buried her face in his chest and whispered, "Why are you on my bed?" Chapter 348. Pei Chi-Chi did not dare to move. She only whispered to him. Tang Yu's fingers pressed down, but in the end, he let go of her. He leaned against the headboard and looked at her. "You and Tang Xian are sleeping in one room each. Miss Pei, do you want me to sleep with Tang Xian and my sister?" His tone was very calm. It did not seem like he had woken up early in the morning. Pei Chi-Chi's voice was a little weak. "No. And don't worry, I won't do anything to you. After all..." He did not finish his sentence and was interrupted by him. Pei Chi-Chi said angrily, "I know. You have a girlfriend." He was obviously stunned for a moment. Then, there was a subtle smile in his eyes. "That's right." As he said that, there was really no need to lie together anymore. He got up and put on a pair of trousers and a sweater. However, a box of things fell on the ground. He bent down to pick it up. He had bought it at the supermarket today. Pei Chi-Chi saw it too. Her face was a little pale. She pursed her lips and did not say a word. Tang Yu looked at her and put the small box into his pocket. He did not explain anything. Indeed, there was no need to explain anything to her. He turned around. "I'll come again tonight." Pei Chi-Chi was stunned. Her voice was a little shaky. "What do you mean?" Tang Yu was very calm. "I'm worried about Tang Xian here. If you're worried, you can bring Tang Xian back." She probably said that out of spite. He had done that with Sun Feifei, and now he was sleeping at her place with condoms for another woman in his pocket. What was going on? There was a trace of a smile in Tang Yu's eyes again. Before he could say anything, Tang Xian stood at the door with a little rabbit in her arms. She looked at Pei Chi-Chi. "Chi-Chi, you don't like me, do you? Is that why you want to chase me away?" Pei Chi-Chi's lips moved, but she could not say anything. Tang Yu chuckled and walked into the bathroom. He said briskly, "You better explain to Tang Xian." Pei Chi-Chi looked at the tearful Tang Xian and the cold face of Tang Yu. She had a feeling in her heart. She should be the one leaving. Let the siblings dominate this place. When she turned around, Tang Xian was still looking at her. Suddenly, Pei Chi-Chi felt a headache. Chi-Chi. It was that incredibly soft meow of a kitten again. When Tang Yu came out of the bathroom, he saw that Pei Chi-Chi was still being pestered by Tang Xian. His mood suddenly became better. Under the morning light, he looked extraordinarily handsome. He bent down and picked Tang Xian up. "All right, stop fooling around." Tang Xian was in Tang Yu's arms. She leaned on Tang Yu's shoulder and made a face at Pei Chi-Chi. She looked like a villain who was intoxicated by success. Pei Chi-Chi suddenly felt a little envious. But she could only hide it in her heart. Pei Chi-Chi sat there. This was her home, but she suddenly felt that she was the outsider. The faint smile on her face froze. Finally, she shook her head. Tang Yu took Tang Xian out for breakfast. He did not ask Pei Chi-Chi, so she naturally did not follow. But he did not take Tang Xan's luggage with him. She was surprised and suspicious. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid that Tang Xan would stick to him again. So she was restless the whole morning. At around 10 o'clock, Tang Yu brought Tang Xan back. Chapter 349. After dinner, Tang Xan lay on the sofa and watched TV with great interest. Tang Yu walked to the balcony to smoke. He was wearing a pair of black trousers and the same sweater. His short haircut made his facial features look even more defined. He leaned against the balcony and smoked 2 or 3 cigarettes at a moderate pace. His elegant appearance made her house seem a little cramped, but he seemed to be at ease. Was he and Tang Xan planning to spend the entire New Year's here? Pei Chi stood in the living room and bit her lower lip. She thought for a moment and walked to the balcony. Tang Xan suddenly said, "Chi, if I were you, I wouldn't walk into the tiger's mouth like a wolf." The little girl stared at the TV and said in an old-fashioned tone, "My brother looks like a hungry wolf. He's not picky at all." Pei Chi thought she heard wrong. Tang Xan was so young, but she knew the words hungry wolf. "I'll deal with you later," Pei Chi warned. Tang Xan giggled. Her mouth was stuffed with slices, and she ate like a little mouse. However, she would be stuffing herself with dog food later. Chi didn't have time to deal with her. Her brother would definitely deal with Chi first. Tang Xan felt that she was being unkind. Pei Chi glared at her again. She opened the balcony door, closed it, and drew the curtains. Tang Xan whimpered. "Silly Chi." Tang Yu was still smoking as he leaned against the wall. Behind him was the bustling night view, and countless fireworks bloomed above and behind him. But none of this could match up to his nobility, nor did it taint him with the slightest bit of the secular world. His dark eyes watched as Pei Chi pushed the door open and walked in. He flicked the cigarette and looked at her. "What's the matter?" Pei Chi stopped 3 steps away from him and looked up at him. The lights on the balcony were off and his back was to the outside, so she couldn't see his expression clearly. She just felt that he was unfathomable. "When are you bringing Tang Xan home?" She looked up as she spoke. The fireworks outside were all imprinted in her eyes, like countless little stars blooming, dazzling her eyes. Tang Yu just looked at her and didn't say anything for a long time. Pei Chi was a little uneasy. She pursed her lips and looked at him. He finally spoke. His voice was abnormally hoarse. "She's annoying. I'm annoyed by you." Pei Chi didn't say anything. "It's not convenient for her to stay at my mother's place, so she can only stay here for a few days," he said lightly, as if it were a matter of course. "Can't you stay there?" she said without thinking. Tang Yu stared at her for a long time before slowly saying, "Pei Chi, Sun Feifei is different from you. She won't be happy if Tang Xan stays with me." "Tang Xan," Pei Chi said nothing. "Xan. Of her of Tang of. Yes, she'll be unhappy." She looked up at him again. "She'll be even more unhappy if you stay at my place." Tang Yu didn't answer. He took out another cigarette and took a puff. "What about you, Pei Chi? If I bring Tang Xan home and let Sun Feifei stay there too, will you be unhappy?" He took out the 01 box from his pocket and put it on the balcony. He smiled. "Will you?" Pei Chi couldn't help but stare at the box. She felt like she was suffocating. She couldn't answer him. Chapter 350. But it was obvious that he didn't want to let her off. His voice became sterner as he said, "Pei Chi, will you?" She was startled, and her heart began to beat wildly again. Tang Yu took a step forward and came to her side. The tips of his shoes were almost touching hers. His long fingers pinched her beautiful chin and lifted it slightly. She looked at him and immediately lowered her eyes, wanting to retreat. But he didn't allow it. He pinched her chin forcefully and forced her to lift her head. Pei Chi, do you want me to do that to her? She was stunned for a moment. Her mouth was slightly agape as she looked at him hopelessly. She knew what he was talking about and knew that it was dangerous now, but she just couldn't move her eyes away. His hot breath enveloped her body. She couldn't move at all and could only watch him lower his head. His thin lips hovered above her lips. His straight nose touched hers gently and his dark eyes looked into her eyes. He was so close to her that her legs went weak. Pei Chi's little hand grabbed onto the wall beside her. Her fingers turned white. His lips gradually lowered. He only touched her lightly and stopped after a light taste. Then, his deep voice rang out and he pressed his lips against hers. Do you want me to do that to her? Her little hand gripped the wall even tighter and her body leaned backwards, trying to escape from the pressure he brought. But he also lowered himself so that it looked like she was sending herself to him. Just as she was about to fall, his large palms supported her waist. His lips curled into a mocking smile. Pei Chi, do you know that your eyelashes tremble when you lie? She bit her lip. She really wanted to find a mirror to look at. But now she didn't dare to move, for fear that he would do something to her again. His fingers gently caressed her red lips. In the dark night, that redness was a little seductive. His long fingers caressed her lips gently. His face was close to her ear and he said in a low voice, do you want me to do that to her too? Even, do what I do with you. Her body was extremely stiff. His voice was very seductive, especially in this cold and quiet night. Pei Chi pursed her lips and bit his finger. He did not take his hand back. He looked at her intently, and she saw a small flame ignite in his eyes. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva. Tang Yu couldn't wait to kill her. He let out a long sigh and withdrew his hand. Before she could react, he pressed her against the wall and sealed her mouth with his thin lips. Pei Chi's eyes widened. Her palms were pressed flat against the tiles behind her. It was cold, but it couldn't extinguish her burning body. His kiss was a little brutal, as if he was punishing her, but at the same time, it seemed like he was using all of his strength. Her lips were hurting from the friction. She struggled a little, but he pressed her palm down and slowly moved it to the top of her head. He pinned her firmly to the wall and used one of his hands to pinch her chin. With a slight force, she unconsciously opened her mouth slightly. He took advantage of the situation and entered her, entangling her. This kiss was getting deeper and hotter. It seemed like he didn't intend to restrain himself and let the kiss bring up his entire body's desire. Pei Chi could only submit. She lifted her little face and was kissed by him over and over again. Her legs felt weak and her body felt a little embarrassed. She had known about love for a long time. She knew that it was desire. Chapter 351. Tang Yu suddenly let go of her just as she was lost in her thoughts. Pei Chi lost her support and her legs gave way, almost slipping. She was still panting. Her eyes were closed and her mouth was slightly swollen. She opened her mouth absent-mindedly. She looked so alluring that Tang Yu wanted to kiss her again. However, he only looked at her coldly. His previous passion had been wiped clean. He looked down at her and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." Her eyes opened. Although he didn't say it, she knew what he meant. His current girlfriend was Sun Fei. He kissed her, so he said he was sorry. At that moment, she was infuriated. What did he think she was? Tang Yu didn't expect her to have such a childish behavior. He didn't pay attention for a moment and was kicked by her. Pei Chi immediately ran towards the door. When she twisted the doorknob, a force from behind dragged her back and heavily threw her into the embrace of a man. Immediately, his domineering aura infected her body. "Let go of me." Her voice was filled with anger. He hugged her, trapping her arms in his embrace. "Miss Pei, you hurt a certain part of me." His tone was indifferent and his words were ruthless. She couldn't tell that he was being perverted. It was good to be good-looking. Pei Chi pursed her lips. "What do you want?" "Mr. Tang, do you want me to pay for your medical fees?" He nodded in agreement. "It's not that serious. You did a good job of bandaging my wound last time. You can take a look at it." Pei Chi didn't think much of it. She didn't expect him to carry her and walk to the living room, then to her bedroom. Tang Xian was still eating, her mouth full of dog food. She knew it. Chi was walking into a trap. Pei Chi was stunned for a moment before she called out Tang Xian's name. She felt that she had been tricked, but how could she dare to interfere with Tang Yu's affairs? Tang Xian groaned and pretended not to see anything. The door slammed shut with a bang. Tang Xian took a careful look, and her whole body trembled. "Chi, I'll count your bones later." Pei Chi was carried into the bedroom by Tang Yu and thrown onto the bed. She flipped over and shifted her body inwards, pursing her lips as she watched him unbuckle his belt. "Mr. Tang." She covered her eyes with her hands and said in a sharp voice, "Don't forget that you have a girlfriend." She tried to awaken his conscience. But the sound of clothes being taken off continued to ring in her ears. She bit her lip, knowing that she could not resist him. Leaning against the headboard, she turned her face to the side and decided to silently protest. Then the bed sank deep, and she clenched her little hands nervously. Then, his breath enveloped her, and he seemed to be very close to her. Tang Yu stared at her closed eyes and suddenly chuckled. "Miss Pei, I just wanted you to check my wound." "What did you think I wanted to do?" His fingers gently stroked her red lips, and his voice was low and hoarse. "Did you think I wanted to make love to you?" There was no moment more embarrassing than this. Pei Chi opened her eyes immediately and stared at his eyes. Tang Yu sat down and pulled her over. "Now, let's check." Chapter 352. Pei Chi lowered her head to look at him, then, she turned her face away and said, "Mr. Tang, please have some self-respect." He had a noble look on his face. "Miss Pei, I'm asking you to examine my wound." "What's wrong? Are you thinking too much?" She was a little angry. No matter how stupid she was, she wouldn't be so stupid as to not feel anything when he was so mean. She pursed her lips and didn't speak for a long time. Tang Yu's voice was even more indifferent. "Remove it for me and examine it." He admitted that he was mean and bullied her. But when she closed her eyes, a demon was born in his heart. He wanted to see her cry and beg for mercy. God knew how much self-control he had to use to not push her down. This was already the lightest punishment he could get. "Are you going to leave after the examination?" She pursed her beautiful lips and looked up at him. She was wearing home clothes. It was fluffy and looked very cute. Her long hair was braided into a ponytail and her features were picturesque. She was so innocent as she knelt beside him. Tang Yu lowered his eyes to look at her. He reached into his trouser pocket and took out a cigarette. He lit it and let out a long puff of smoke. That was the only way he could suppress the evil fire in his body. Pei Chi knelt beside him and carefully examined him. To be honest, she knew that he wasn't hurt at all. It was just that he was mean, but in her heart, he was still a threat. It was as simple as that. Done. In addition to the examination, she also offered a massage. Tang Yu almost burned himself with the cigarette in his hand. Her hands were too soft. He looked down at her eyes, but she was still kneeling there, on the same bed. But it was no longer the past. Pei Chi-Chi's eyes were a little hot and she couldn't explain it. Just as he had always emphasized to her, he already had someone else by his side. I'll sleep with Tang Xian tonight. You can bring her back tomorrow. She made up her mind and said. Tang Yu tidied up his clothes and continued smoking. When she walked to the door, he said, Are you afraid? Pei Chi-Chi's fingers fell on the doorknob and she paused. She didn't turn around and said softly, Yes, I'm afraid. When she confessed, he didn't know what to do with her. He looked at her deeply. Pei Chi-Chi walked out and her legs were a little weak. Tang Xian looked at her and she dropped the photo on the sofa. She quickly picked it up and put it in her mouth. She looked at Pei Chi-Chi while eating. The sun rose from the west. Her brother actually didn't eat Chi-Chi. I'm going to sleep first. Pei Chi-Chi's voice was calm. I've told your brother that he will bring you back tomorrow. It wasn't that she didn't want to see Tang Yu, but seeing him would hurt more than not seeing him. When she looked into his eyes and he kissed her, she felt pain, as if a piece of her heart had been ripped from it. He left and took that piece with him. Although Tang Xian didn't want to, she was still worried when she saw Pei Chi-Chi like this. She lowered her head and said, Oh. Then, she watched Pei Chi-Chi walk into the guest room. After the door closed, Tang Xian carefully ran to Tang Yu. Tang Yu was leaning against the headboard with an indifferent expression. She didn't know what he was thinking. Chapter 353. You're just a kid. Don't bother yourself with adult matters, Tang Yu said calmly. Tang Xian pouted. Chi-Chi is also a kid. Chi-Chi will only be 21 after the new year. She looked at Tang Yu as if he was a beast. Tang Yu pursed his lips. He couldn't do anything to his sister. He reached out and pinched her little face. Nonsense. That's right. Tang Xian said boldly. Chi-Chi is still a student and you're already bullying her. Her brother glared at her. Tang Xian didn't dare to make a sound. She crept away like a little mouse. After she left, Tang Yu let out a long sigh. Tang Xian was right. He did make a move on a kid. When Chi-Chi followed him, she wasn't even 20 years old. He laid down and touched the pillow under his head. It was indeed the pillow in Xia City. That night, no one slept well. Tang Xian especially hugged Pei Chi-Chi and drooled. She drooled the whole night. Breakfast was prepared by Pei Chi-Chi. She wouldn't be calculative with Tang Yu. After breakfast, Tang Xian followed behind Tang Yu and was chased out by Pei Chi-Chi. She looked back as she walked, hoping that Chi-Chi would ask her to stay. Pei Chi-Chi was reluctant, but she had to send Tang Xian away. She steeled her heart and closed the door. Tang Xian carried her bag and sat in Tang Yu's car. Every strand of her hair was crestfallen. Brother, Chi-Chi doesn't want me anymore. Tang Yu reached out and patted her little head. He smiled. You still have a brother. Chi-Chi is Chi-Chi. Brother is brother. It's different. Tang Xian was very persistent with Pei Chi-Chi. She didn't know why. Her mother didn't like Chi-Chi, and her brother and Chi-Chi had broken up, but she just wanted to be close to Chi-Chi. Tang Yu looked at her silently for a while, then started the car. In the end, he still sent Tang Xian back. Tang Ziyuan had called him several times in the past 2 days. He also knew the reason why Tang Xian left home. It was nothing more than Zhao Ke's affairs being reported in the newspapers. Actually, Tang Yu wasn't surprised. He had heard about it a long time ago, but he didn't take it to heart when Ching mentioned it a few times. He had never cared about unimportant people or unimportant things. But he didn't expect Zhao Ku to be so careless and sell the photos to the newspaper. Naturally, Tang Ziyuan was still angry. Zhao Ku, on the other hand, was more restrained, but she was still strict with Tang Axayan. When Tang Axayan returned home, she had to live with her tail between her legs. It was quite pitiful. Tang Yu watched as Tang Axayan walked into Yanhui. The car only stopped for a moment before it drove off. Now that Tang Axayan was back, he had no reason to visit Pei Chichi. Without Tang Axayan in the house, it was a little quiet, even though Pei Chichi had already turned the television to the maximum. In fact, she knew very well that the loneliness wasn't because Tang Axayan was absent, but because Tang Yu was absent. When he was around, she felt anxious and uneasy. But when he wasn't around, her heart felt empty. Pei Chichi told him that she was afraid, and what she said was true. She was afraid that she would get used to it. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get used to life without him. She was afraid. When Pei Chichi went to clean up the bedroom, she realized that Tang Yu had left the box of t-shirts on her bedside table. She stared at it for a long time, then finally swept it into the trash can, along with the rubbish in the house. Chapter 354. Pei Chichi looked at it for a long time, her fingers clenching tightly. A thought suddenly appeared in her mind, and this thought made her unable to remain calm. Her gaze fell on the photo for a long time. Then, she saw the name tag of a certain hotel on the bedside. She immediately got up, changed her clothes, and left with her bag. She drove to the hotel and went to the front desk. The receptionist looked at her suspiciously. "Miss, do you want to book a room?" Pei Chichi shook her head. "I want to check the room records." "Is that okay?" "That's against the rules. But if there's a special need." The receptionist laughed dryly, but her eyes were burning as she looked at Pei Chichi. Her meaning was very obvious. Pei Chichi wasn't an unreasonable person. She took out 1,000 yuan from her bag and put it on the counter. Biting her lip, she said, "My boyfriend might have betrayed me and got together with a rich woman. I want to check." The receptionist looked at Pei Chichi sympathetically. She put the money into her bag and said angrily, "I hate scumbags like this the most. Tell me the name, and I'll check it for you." "Help me check the woman's name." Usually, they use the woman's name to register. Pei Chichi's fingers tightened on her bag. "Her name is Zhao Ku, the Ku from Wang Ku." The lady at the front desk tapped her nails a few times, and Zhao Ku's name appeared. "There are only 2 records. She got a room with a man named Rong Lei." The receptionist looked at Pei Chichi sympathetically. "Is Rong Lei your boyfriend?" Pei Chichi lowered her eyes, looking like she was about to cry. Yes. In fact, she was shocked inside. Rong Lei. Wasn't that Zhou Meilin's gigolo? Why was he with Zhao Ku? At this moment, the receptionist had already checked Rong Lei's name. She pulled out a long list of hundreds of names. She looked at Pei Chichi sympathetically. "Your boyfriend is very strong. He's had sex with more than 200 women in 3 years. Pei Chichi forced a smile. "Don't tell anyone that I'm here to check the records. Of course, this kind of scumbag should leave him." The receptionist also felt that it was a pity. How could such a beautiful girl be with such a scumbag? However, after Pei Chichi left, the receptionist looked at the record again and realized, this man is a gigolo. She snorted lightly. Not only did she cheat a woman of her money, but she also harmed such a beautiful young lady. Pei Chichi sat in the car, feeling a little uneasy. Zhao Ku, Zhou Meilin, Rong Lei. Her car accident. It was as if something had broken out of the cocoon. That thought flashed through her mind. She wanted to catch it, but she couldn't. She tried her best to calm herself down and closed her eyes to think about that day. Car accident, Zhou Meilin. Rong Lei is back. Rong Lei and Zhao Ku had a falling out. Was that why there was that photo in the newspaper? She thought for a long time and decided to check at the news agency. Pei Chi rushed to the address of the city news. It was a small building that wasn't very bright, which didn't match its name. Xiaowen had helped her find the address. Xiaowen had been a secretary for a long time and had some connections. Because it was the Lunar New Year, the news agency was very quiet. The old man in the mail room looked at Pei Chi and stopped her. "Young lady, who are you looking for?" Pei Chi stopped in her tracks and smiled. "I want to buy a news section, but I don't know which department to look for." Chapter 355. The old man in charge of the mail room adjusted his glasses and looked up. "You're looking for Mr. Su. He's working today. You can go in and look for him." Pei Chi nodded and walked in. There were 2 rows of offices inside, and most of them were closed. Only the innermost office was open. Pei Chi stood at the door and saw a middle-aged man in a black coat sitting inside. He was holding a cigarette and reading a script. Mr. Su heard footsteps and looked up. He saw Pei Chi standing at the door. "What's the matter?" Mr. Su looked at the young lady and asked politely. Pei Chi walked in and placed a newspaper in front of Mr. Su. She asked softly, "Are these photos given to you by someone named Rong Lei?" Director Su only took a glance and remembered that there was indeed such a thing. This section usually sells for 5,000. But because it involves someone's privacy, I took 20,000. He did not hide it. Pei Chi lowered her eyes and smiled. "Then you must have other photos here, right?" Mr. Su narrowed his eyes and took a step back. He looked at Pei Chi from head to toe. "Why? You want to buy it?" he asked suspiciously. "Do you have a grudge with these 2 people?" "He's my boyfriend." That woman snatched him away. Pei Chi looked down. "I will not let that woman off easily." Mr. Su sneered and opened the drawer to look for something. He said to Pei Chi, "I've seen this kind of drama many times. Isn't it just a man? It's not worth it. Isn't this kind of man just good-looking?" Even though he said that, he still took out a thick stack of photos and placed them on the table. "I can sell these photos to you, but I have to say this first. Whatever happens has nothing to do with me, and I won't take responsibility for it. Of course, I can't say that I'm the one who sold these photos. It's all up to you." As Director Su spoke, he took another cigarette and said lightly, "Don't think that our newspaper office has a great reputation outside. In fact, it's long gone. It's just an empty shell. Otherwise, why would we accept this kind of business?" Pei Chi pursed her lips. Director Su raised his finger and gestured. 5,000 apiece. No bargaining. If you can accept this price, then we have a deal. Pei Chi took the photos and looked at them one by one. She frowned slightly. To be honest, the photo that Rong Lei had placed in the newspaper was really special. These photos were the real highlight. He was almost naked and unsightly. Director Su looked at Pei Chi coldly. He could not help but feel a little surprised. This little girl was actually able to maintain her composure even after seeing all this. Pei Chi counted the photos. There were about 20 of them. 100,000. "I'll buy it, and I'll give you 200,000 yuan." Even if Pei Chi didn't say it, Director Su understood what she meant. He nodded his head. All right. You don't have to worry about the rest. He put the money in a brown paper bag and handed it to her. Pei Chi pursed her lips and took out 200,000 yuan from her bag. It was obvious that she had prepared this beforehand. Director Su took the money and did not say much. He sent Pei Chi off personally. Chapter 356. The old man in the mail room wouldn't say anything since he got the money for free. Director Su narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the stairs. He suddenly felt that he had seen that girl before. Where had he seen her before? He couldn't remember for a long time. Finally, he thought of something and ran back to his office to look through the old newspapers. He found it. She was in the picture with Mr. Tang from Xingyuan. He remembered that the girl's surname was Pei. She was supposed to be engaged to Mr. Tang, but the rumors said that she ran away. Director Su's body went limp. He felt that he had been involved in something terrible. Once again, he walked to the mail room and passed a cigarette to Elder Lin. If today's incident is leaked, we won't be able to keep our rice bowls anymore. Old Lin nodded. Director Su patted his shoulder again. We have to work until we retire. He went back and gave Old Lin another 10,000 yuan. Remember, don't say that you saw this girl. If they didn't say it, they would have nothing to do with it. If they said it, they would lose their lives. Downstairs, Pei Chi was sitting in the car. She closed her eyes and her mind was in a mess. Zhao Ku was the one who didn't want her to marry into the Tang family. Zhou Meilin was the one who hated her the most. But how daring was Zhou Meilin? Did she really dare to hire someone to kill her? Pei Chi pursed her lips. She went to the place where Zhou Meilin was locked up. She asked to see Zhou Meilin, but the person inside came out and shook his head. Zhou Meilin doesn't want to see you. Pei Chi was a little disappointed. Zhou Meilin didn't want to see her, so she couldn't force her. Did she say anything else? She asked the prison warden. The warden thought for a while and shook his head. No, but she asked why Pei Huan didn't come. He looked at Pei Chi. Why? Aren't you her daughter? I am. But I have some conflicts with my mother. She looked at the warden. Can you pass the message again? Tell her that Pei Huan came with me. The warden looked at her with a deep gaze. Pei Chi took out an envelope and said in a low voice, I just want to ask a few questions. It won't cause any bad effects. The warden took the letter and thought for a moment before saying, I also need to see if the person is willing. The instructions from above are not to be forced. Prisoners are also human beings, and they have their rights as citizens. He stared at Pei Chi and pressed an internal line. Xiao Zhang, tell Zhou Meilin that her daughter, Pei Huan, is here. After hanging up, he looked at Pei Chi. You only have 5 minutes. Thank you. Pei Chi knew that there was only one chance like this. She followed a prison guard to a small reception room that was blocked by a barbed wire fence. When Zhou Meilin came out, her hair was a little messy, and she was wearing a plain prison uniform. Her face was sallow, and her eyebrows were lowered. She must have suffered a lot in here. Pei Chi thought about it and agreed. Pei Huan didn't ask questions, and Zhou Meilin didn't have anyone to take care of her. Naturally, she was in dire straits. When she saw Pei Chi, Zhou Meilin's slightly dull eyes lit up for a moment, and then quickly dimmed. She said to the female prison guard next to her, I don't want to see her. I want to go back. I want to go back. She spoke incoherently. However, the prison guard was ordered by her superior to keep Zhou Meilin in custody. As long as she moved, the electric baton would hit her. Chapter 357. Pei Qiqi walked over and was separated from Zhou Meilin by the barbed wire. She looked straight at Zhou Meilin with her eyes that were as dark as midnight. I just want to ask you one thing. Zhou Meilin seemed to be prepared for her arrival. She lowered her head and lowered her eyes. Her voice was a little hoarse. Where's Pei Huan? I only want to see my Huan Huan. Pei Qiqi looked at the old woman in front of her. Really, she was a far cry from how she used to be. In the past, she only thought that Zhou Meilin was vulgar. She was already so old, but she still dressed up in gaudy clothes. But it was better than being in such a sorry state now. Pei Huan won't be coming. Pei Qiqi smiled faintly. Pei Huan is now with a producer. She wants to be a star. Zhou Meilin was stunned. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Pei Qiqi. Her eyes were wide open, as if they were about to pop out. All of a sudden, she broke free from the prison guard and ran to the barbed wire. Her fingers, which were as thin as a chicken's, grabbed the barbed wire as if she wanted to grab Pei Qiqi in her hands. She kept saying, "How is that possible? How could my Huan Huan sleep with someone else? She's the Lin family's wife. She's pregnant." Her fingers grabbed a corner of Pei Qiqi's clothes and she widened her eyes. Pei Qiqi, you must be talking nonsense. You're jealous of Huan Huan, so you deliberately said that, right? Pei Qiqi did not break free. She just looked at Zhou Meilin indifferently with a sneer at the corner of her mouth. Jinrong became a vegetable, and Pei Huan aborted the child. They divorced, and Pei Huan took 50 million. Don't you know about this? Zhou Meilin's yellowish face became even uglier. Her head could not help shaking, and her face was full of disbelief. She did all this for the sake of a better life for herself and Pei Huan. How could this fool get a divorce? Just that belly alone could ensure that she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life. It had to be said that Zhou Meilin knew her daughter's character very well. She knew that Pei Huan could not bear hardships and could only rely on others. I saw her the day before yesterday. She was with that man. Pei Qiqi's lips had a faint smile. And she was also taking drugs. Zhou Meilin's fingers tightened and suddenly loosened. She covered her ears and screamed hoarsely, "No, no. How could it be?" At this time, the prison guard rushed over and hit her with an electric baton. B. Zhou Meilin's body went numb from the pain. Her pale lips trembled as she squatted down. It was a subconscious reflex. Pei Qiqi could tell that Zhou Meilin had been beaten up quite a bit. She still stood there calmly and looked at Zhou Meilin. All of this was caused by you. If it wasn't for the car accident you conspired, Jinrong would not have become like that, and Pei Huan would not have lost her footing. Zhou Meilin squatted down, her hair piled up on her head like a pile of grass. Her face could not be seen, but she muttered to herself, "Yes, it's me, it's me. But shouldn't you be the one to die? Shouldn't a bastard like you be the one to die?" Pei Qiqi's heart turned cold. She looked up and closed her eyes. "Auntie, you've been squatting here for your entire life just for a gigolo. Is it worth it?" Zhou Meilin raised her head and smiled at Pei Qiqi. Her smile was terrifying. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.